it's so nice to see you. Thank you so much for coming on my show.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege. I appreciate it.
I'm so excited, and maybe excited isn't the right word because we're talking about suffering today. And but
I'm so thrilled to talk about stuff. This is so great.
woo, suffering. But I think it's such an important topic when we're on this spiritual path and we're on our own self-healing journey. And I think there is, a suffering connotation, a negative connotation that comes with suffering. But I also think once we gather a certain level of self-awareness, there's a different lens that comes with our own suffering and how much control we have over it. So I guess maybe where we could start is to talk about suffering in general, why we tend to be in this loop of suffering, and why it's kind of this, if we're stuck in this broken record, that it's sometimes hard to get out of. So why do we suffer, and why do we lean in so much to our suffering? Why do we get to a point where it feels almost better to suffer than it does to heal and to feel better?
Yeah, yeah. Boy, that is the question, isn't it? That's a really good question.
That's why
Uh,
you have a job, right?
well, true. I'm a psychotherapist, and so I deal everyone that I talk to all day long is suffering in ways large and small. And so I actually get that question quite a bit. But I would say, why do we suffer? Is that suffering is intrinsic to living. It's just a part of our life. Look at the major religions. The four noble truths of Buddhism. The first truth is life is suffering. The Buddha says all I teach is suffering and the relief of suffering. Right.
Yep.
In the Christian religion, in the book of Job 5:7, man is born to suffer as the sparks fly upward. And so, in all the religions, suffering is addressed. And so, we something happens and we feel bad. We go, "Oh no, I'm suffering. Something's wrong." And no, nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. It's like it's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to suffer, and it's not necessarily bad or good. It's unpleasant for
Yep.
sure, but a lot of good things come from our suffering. Um, I mean, it's not good or bad, is it? It has both wrapped up in it. But there's a lot of blessings within the suffering for sure.
I think, would you agree that once we get to a certain level of self awareness on our path, it's easier to, expand that perspective of our suffering so that we can start to really unpack why it is we're suffering, as well as create those steps to kind of step out of the suffering?
Right, right. Yes, and I mean that's the whole premise of modern psychology, isn't it? Is to lead us out of our suffering. Um, and so there's sort of different flavors of suffering. Some is um, acute suffering. There's a thing happened. I feel bad. The bad thing goes away, and I feel better. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's chronic suffering that it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Right. And it seems like it never ends. So if I cut my finger, I wrap it up, and pretty soon it feels better and everything's good.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, by all means, please do. There's no reason to suffer needlessly, of course. But for those times that you can't put a band aid on it, or the band aid that we try to put on them, people suffer and they drink alcohol or take drugs or do all kinds of crazy sex or, gambling addictions, all the addictions, basically. Um, it's a, you know, it's an attempt to not feel our suffering, basically. Netflix or video games or whatever it is, we try to use these things to not suffer, distract us from our suffering. And the actual distraction causes us more trouble than the original suffering sometimes.
Mm,
Does that make
yeah.
sense?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's almost perpetuating our own suffering through trying to avoid suffering, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. And what I kind of hear you saying is that avoiding emotion and avoiding, feeling and numbing or escaping through these things is really what continues to perpetuate the chronic suffering that we go through.
That's exactly right. And we're kind of kicking the can down the road. It doesn't go anywhere, obviously. It shows back up. But I guess uh, when we turn toward our suffering and not turn away from it. Now, to do that, we have to have capacity. We have to have a capacity to hold. And so we have loving kindness for ourselves, compassion for ourselves, and we can hold. If there's not anything we can do in the outside world to change it, then all we have is the way that we view the suffering. That's the only our perception we can change.
Would you say that that's the first step to breaking the cycle of our suffering is the perception of it?
I yes, I think so. I mean, I think that is the first step. Now, whether you can do it or not is a whole other, that's a whole other story. I've been working on this stuff for decades, and I'm barely have a handle on it. But it's possible. If we look at Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, he came up with a logotherapy from his experience in the concentration camps. Well, you can't just play video games in the concentration camp, or,
Right.
there wasn't a lot of alcohol, or, I don't know what else you would use, but there was no turning away from the suffering, right? And so
Mhm.
you had the only thing you could do is change it. A classic example, an optimist looks at a glass and says it's half full. A pessimist looks at the glass half empty. So which one is right? Well, they're both right and they're both wrong. The truth is it's half empty and half full at the same time,
Yeah.
right? And so that perception, though, if you're stuck in your pessimism, then you'll see the half empty part, and the half full part will be hidden from you.
Mm. Is it true from a brain chemistry point of view that our brain is really good at filtering based on our beliefs so that if we have a pessimistic lens, we see the world and everything is pessimistic, everything is bad, everything is negative, and our brain kind of filters out all the good, happy rainbow stuff?
Yes, yeah, that's a confirmation bias, is what they call that. And so, yeah, if you're attuned to that, then you look around in the world and you see the pessimistic things, and you just latch onto them, right? And so, the cool thing about that, though, it works in reverse. And so, if you can change the outside world by the way that your perception is. In other words, if you see if you have a positive worldview, then you'll collect the things you're curating your experiences. You'll find the positive ones, and the negative ones will kind of just flow on by. It's sort of like standing in a knee deep in a river, and lotus blossom will come by, and you can pick that up, and then some other less palatable object might come floating by, and you could just let that one go. We kind of want to do that with our emotions and experiences.
I like that analogy, because life is still flowing and everything that's flowing with you might not be the best thing to pick up and take with you along your journey, but we're still, acknowledging that it's passing by us, but we're going to let it continue passing, very similar to the cloud analogy. Our emotions are clouds and they're passing by in the sky.
Yeah, there's a blue sky behind there. Yeah, yeah. I think it's kind of beautiful that we get to create our own perception of reality.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that gives us a lot of power, right? If I
Hmm.
have fear and anger in my heart when I come to talk to you, well, it's gonna change everything I say. It's going to
Yeah.
change the way it's delivered, the way it's received. Conversely, if I have loving kindness and compassion in my heart, then that I'll come from that place. The beautiful thing is, I mean, as difficult as it may be, of course, I know it's not easy, but if I am able to move from fear and anger toward loving kindness, acceptance, forgiveness inside of me, forget the outside world, just inside of my own heart, then I can connect in these loving ways to everybody in my life. and all animals and situations and all of reality.
I love that. That really reminds me, there was this metaphor I heard once, or I guess it's an analogy. I haven't had enough coffee to say
It could
tell
be a
you.
simile. Who knows?
So the best comparison I ever heard with what we're talking about is when you squeeze an orange juice, or oh my god, I've ruined it already. When you squeeze an orange, what comes out is orange juice. So when you squeeze a person or you put pressure or you're facing adversity or complex situations, whatever comes out is on what's on the inside.
Yeah,
So if you're
yeah.
practicing loving kindness for yourself, for others, when you're in stressful situations, if you're suffering, if you're in these moments where you feel like, you're in a shit storm or the world's raining down on you, it's much easier to express compassion and kindness and love, even if the external world feels like suffering.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. And we can use everything for our upliftment, like the fun experiences, the unpleasant experiences, all of it. Um, so basically, you go to Disneyland and you have a fun day, and that's one thing. And then something terrible will happen, and you'll have a terrible day. And both of those experiences are good and necessary. Um, because I mean, we do learn a lot from suffering, but if you just suffered all the time, you would just be,
Right.
shell shocked. You need the good experiences to settle your nervous system down and to, cultivate positivity, and give you hope and expectations that things will go well. And so that's necessary too. And we need the suffering part to be able to learn and grow and rise in consciousness.
So, for someone who might be at a point where they're suffering in their lives, and this idea of just changing your thoughts seems a little overwhelming. It
Yeah.
seems like a lot. What can they do to start to move forward towards having good experiences or cultivating more love and kindness into their lives? Because I think when we're in this cycle of suffering, it can feel really hard to climb out of. And something as simple as changing your thoughts seems like a lot because there's such a heavy load to carry.
Right, right. And I mean, it does kind of, in some ways, it goes, oh, I'll just change my thoughts. That'll be easy, no problem there. And then you try to do it, and then of course, it's not so easy,
You're like,
right?
shit.
Right. But I would say, look, you're on your life path one way or the other, and you will grow and go on your life journey, your spiritual path. That's going to happen whether you like it or not, basically.
Yeah.
And so if you kind of co-create with spirit, I think there's less stress and friction in this journey if you're able to go, oh man, this is really unpleasant. I don't like this. I know for sure because of my studies and my meditations that I know I'm able to learn now. I wonder what I can. I wonder what's available for me to learn.
Hmm.
Um, and instead of, I mean, the first thing we do is look for a way not to feel bad anymore.
Yeah.
And then when you can't do that, which happens often, then then you've got these other tools that you can use.
For me personally, on my spiritual journey, I think I was at a point of suffering and being really lost, but then I really just wanted to skip all the hard stuff and jump ahead to the I'm really
Yeah,
spiritual now and I have all my gifts, and everything just magically disappeared, and that was all
yeah.
because I did the spiritual path. But I think there's this point where we really have to look at it, and we really have to face it, and we have to look in the mirror and be honest and loving and compassionate towards ourselves. But that's a really hard thing to do. And that's a really courageous thing to do. So, what advice would you give to someone who is really looking in the mirror for the first time and realizing, oh my gosh, I have been numbing this suffering. I have been escaping. I have been trying to avoid feeling this altogether. And then we look, and there's kind of a tidal wave that happens when we really, really look. So, what advice would you give for someone who's navigating this point where they're ready to look, but it's scary?
It is scary. I will tell you, I can say from my experiences, it was very, very helpful to have a guide.
Mm,
I went to the University of Santa Monica and I got a master's in spiritual psychology. And so they looked a lot at the spiritual path and how it fits in with uh, therapeutic interventions. And so it's helpful to have a teacher, someone who's been down that path before that can kind of give you some advice and tools to work with. I mean, I would say getting a teacher and educating yourself would be the first things that I would try.
One thing that you keep saying that I also think is important, but that I think having a mentor is really important and helpful for, is someone to hold space for you and also remind you that these experiences aren't good or bad. Because I think it's really easy to label them as such, and when we can, see them in a more neutral lens, I think that's really helpful as well.
I mean, it does kind of take the pressure off you just a little
Yeah,
bit,
just a little.
Yeah. I mean, it's still, look, it's going to suck. There's just
Yeah.
no two ways about it. But if it's going to suck, you might as well make it worthwhile. You might
Yeah.
as well get the good stuff out of it. And if you feel bad, your peace is disturbed, then you're ready to learn. I will tell you that, like, I don't know what the heck is going on, is the sentence that is always said right before you learn something, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know what's happening is good because that means that you're about to learn something. Yeah.
I really like that. I think that's so true too, because I think it's these dark moments when we're truly learning and we're truly unpacking and we're growing and we're being stretched and challenged and, pushed outside of our comfort zone that we've cultivated, and we've put up these walls in this really like gooey bubble full of distractions. That once you step out of it and you're like, oh my gosh, what is going on? You're right. It's true. It's like that stepping into that void of the unknown where all the good sacred learning happens.
Yeah. It's outside your comfort zone for sure. Right. Yeah.
It's the duality of life, of having those really joyous experiences where we can go with the flow and, we're not necessarily learning, but we're experiencing. And then I think it's the times when we kind of come to a halt when we're in these moments of suffering and have the opportunity for growth, is when the most important moments of our lives, I would say.
Yeah, and I'd give yourself a break too. I mean, it's just, just kindness and compassion and that stuff for yourself. Is because if you're going through a tough time, then we don't want to beat up on you any further.
Yeah.
That it's going to be tough, and it's supposed to be. Our suffering gets our attention in a way we cannot ignore.
Yeah.
It's like a baby on an airplane, right? If
Mhm.
somebody brings a baby onto an airplane, you're going, oh God, don't let them sit by me, please, please, no, no. And then of course they always do, and then the baby's crying like crazy, and it's just like, dude, I'll give you a bottle, I'll change your diaper, anything, stop crying, please. You're driving me crazy. Well, the baby's cry is is designed to get our attention. It's like, you got to take care of the baby.
Yeah.
It's like, I will do anything to get this baby to give me a break for 10 minutes. It demands our attention. We can't ignore it and kick the can down the road anymore, like we have been. Mhm.
I also feel like they're just such beautiful launching pads in our lives that if we didn't go through these experiences, we wouldn't learn deeply about ourselves and we wouldn't get to unlearn things that we've learned about ourselves. Because I think it's so easy, if we're falling into long term patterns of suffering, to label ourselves as a victim, or
Yes.
I'm Lena who has this ailment and that's my identity and that's my story. And I'm going to ride that because it keeps me safe and I don't have to look at the baby crying, and I can, hide in the bathroom on the airplane and not have to deal with any of
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Yes, by all means, please hide in the bathroom. And if that works, then great. But usually it's like a 4 hour flight. It's kind of tough to stay in the bathroom the whole time. Oh my gosh. Well, I wrote down a list of off the top of my head of blessings that are associated with suffering. You want to hear some?
Yes, that would be amazing.
I think about these things unless I write them down. I can't remember what I know. So suffering gives us clarity. Yeah, it sharpens our thoughts and intentions. Boy, I you smash your thumb, all of a sudden you got very good clarity. Suffering is the main ingredient of change. We probably are not going to change unless we suffer. We get our butts kicked in some ways.
Yep.
Suffering is an ego check, right? It kind of sets us down and reminds us that we're not the boss of the whole world. I'm extremely disappointed to find out I'm not the boss of the whole world, which I'm still getting over that one. That was I was 2 years old. It helps us connect and empathize with other people. When we, just like me, they suffer. Our suffering connects us in a way. Without that, it's sort of like a mental pity or a mental, like, oh, that must be terrible for you. But if I've been through the same thing, it's like, oh my God, yeah, I've been there. I know what you feel. So it's more of a heart based thing. Suffering gives us insight. It gets us physical pain, physical suffering gets us out of our head and into our bodies, right?
Mm.
Boy, another way you can't ignore. It connects us to the present moment. So we're not worried about tomorrow or the yesterday. It's like, oh man, I'm suffering right now. I'm definitely thinking of the present moment. Wisdom is always preceded by suffering, as I just said.
Mhm.
Suffering is our greatest teacher, and it teaches us. It's an ultimate wake up call that calls for change. Um, if our suffering is extreme enough, these big life changing moments of suffering, it shatters our ego based self. And when our ego is that false self of ego is destroyed, our true self is our spiritual self is able to come forward. And finally, the suffering is a part of life that we talked about earlier. Then that means that if I'm suffering, I'm alive. And if I'm alive, there's hope. And so suffering can definitely be the foundation for hope.
I love all of those because it puts such a beautiful lens in these moments of our lives where we feel, kicked down by the universe, or why is this happening to me? And, why, and why me? And I think they're putting that lens on it. And I love how you said there's hope. You're alive and there's hope.
About suffering.
Yeah, we're
Uh,
back to the yay suffering.
it's like, hey, Billy, what did you do this weekend? Well, I sat around and thought about suffering all weekend long. How about you? What did you?
Yeah, but I think we have almost entered to into a phase now where I think as a collective we are more self-aware and we're more willing to look at our suffering and the suffering, of the groups in our society, and I think we're ready to face it. So I think I don't want to say this prematurely, but I almost think that, the shadow work and the exploring of our suffering is becoming kind of cool. Like it's
Yeah.
in right now.
Oh, is it?
I think so. I don't know.
Wow.
I'm declaring it right now, but I
Okay.
think but I think with all the things that you just said, it really suffering allows us to cultivate a new version of ourselves that is more loving, is more kind, is more present, is more aligned with our true selves, is more empathetic, is more understanding, is stronger, wiser, all the good things that as we grow and as we heal we look for. And it's those moments and these moments of friction and grief in our lives that help shape that person.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's impossible I don't know if we can really have empathy without it, or compassion for other
Yeah,
people without it. We kind of can, but it's more of a mental exercise rather than a heartfelt experience.
that's really true. That's a really good point. You're right, because it's like we can understand that someone else is sad and offer our support, but until you felt it and you understand, the pain in your heart and what it feels like in a really all-encompassing experience, you don't know.
And we're always looking for love and connection in the world, and
Mhm.
that's where our connection comes from. Where I'm able to connect with people that suffer because I've been in the same boat. And being frustrated on your spiritual path, yeah, me too. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
done that too. And so I can, it's not like, oh, I feel bad for those poor people that are suffering. It's sort of the difference between pity and empathy, right? Pity
Yeah.
is like there's a one up position. I'm kind of looking down at these poor people here. But
Mhm.
empathy, no, is like, no, we're on the same level. I've absolutely been where you've been. And my able to understand and hold space for someone at that level is life changing.
Yeah.
To have somebody listen to you and just know what you're going through, it's just like, oh my gosh, that's about as deep of human connections as we can get.
I agree. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit I think that's something that many of us experience as we get to a certain place on this path and we've gone through it is we want to turn around and help others. And it's also hard not to
Yeah.
direct others in their own healing, in their own suffering. So how can we be a supportive pillar and a supportive space for those who are suffering and allow them, to work through it and to heal through it themselves with being compassionate and also mindful that this is their journey and that we really don't have any control over it, even though we want to fix, we want to help, we want to pull them out of it, but
Right.
it's their path. And that has been one of the hardest things for me to accept on this path, because we want everyone to experience the empowerment and the growth that comes with healing your own suffering, or healing the seasons of suffering, I should say, because I don't think it's ever, one and done. We go through seasons in our lives.
Yes, yes. I had a teacher, Mary Hulnick, and who I just love so dearly, and she told me that we allow the other person the dignity of their own process. And the first
Yeah.
time she said that, I went, "Ooh, that's a great idea." And I wrote it down in my little notebook, and I said, "Yeah, I'll do that. That's a good idea." And little did I know how difficult that would be.
Yeah.
uh, it's easy to say, but tough to do. And basically, it's an intention of boundaries, right? It's like
Mm,
I can't fix anybody. Like they're on their own journey, right? Now I can share my journey with you, my experience. I can listen to you. I can send loving kindness to you. But I can't fix you. I can't make you do anything that you don't want to do.
yeah.
Like I think everyone should have a meditation practice. And I have varying degrees of success in talking people into that. And so um, I don't have any control over what people do, but I can be involved with them and loving toward them and not be attached to the outcome. If you want to change somebody else, change yourself, right?
Mm,
That's the where that's where it is, because uh, they can say, man, that looks pretty good. How did you do that? Right? That's the thing. Instead of like, what you kids ought to do is put those video games down and,
go
whatever. Like,
outside.
yeah, go outside. Quit looking at your phone all the time. Look, that's not going to work ever. But if you can model the behavior, it's like, man, I don't know what. And that's the way it was for me. I met someone that was way further along on the path than I was, and I went, "What is going on here? That I don't understand a word she's saying. I know she's saying English words, but I don't know what they mean. And she seems they people on that path, they react differently to situations than most people, and just like, what is that? What's going on here? And so that curiosity and that example is the thing that teaches people, and that kind of draws them forward rather than lecturing folks.
I think I'm not going to quote this perfectly, but how Ram Dass says that the best thing I can do for you is work on myself. And,
Hmm.
that it's exactly what you said, that all we can do is work on ourselves, and radiate our own life and kindness and experiences, and hold space for others. But really, it only comes down to what we can control, which is ourselves, and that we are truly capable of healing ourselves. And that is the ripple effect for everything else.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I would say about this is that as we value ourselves, our true selves, our intrinsic self, like the value of me is in not doing the fixing, the doing things, the
Mhm.
writing books and things like.
Yeah.
All of those are good. Those are good things, but the value of me is the human being instead of the human doing, right? And
Mhm.
so my presence, my loving presence, is can be life changing. I mentioned Mary Holnick. I remember I was talking to her and her husband was telling me all these really wise things. I mean, great things, and I was writing them down. And she was looking at me, and I don't even know how to say it. It was past loving. She was looking into me,
Mm.
and that look, just the space that she held, it changed my life forever. And she didn't say anything. She didn't give me any wise advice. There's a time and a place for wise advice too, but just if I am truly deeply loving and compassionate to myself, I expand that energy out to you, and we're both
Mhm.
connected in that way. It changes people's lives, and we don't value that. We value doing things or fixing things or
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
It's so true. And I think it's something so simple that we almost overlook at times
Yeah.
because our human instinct, we want to be seen, we want to be held, we want to be listened to, we want to be supported. But in doing that, in doing this work, we're peeling back layers and beliefs that we had to be a certain way. We had to
Yeah.
look a certain way. We had to do this. We had to do that to be happy, and to peel back the layers and be vulnerably authentic, just you, and to be seen and loved and held and supported in that way, I think is very life changing when you can just be and be loved and be enough in just not feeling like you have to exert any kind of, facade or put up your peacock feathers in order to survive in our society, which I think is something that people are stepping into, but there's still a lot of change that has to happen. It's the social media world that we exist in that we feel like we have to fit a certain narrative. And I think our self-healing journey unravels that a lot. And to feel just fully in your own self, I think is very empowering. And so when I love that you said that that was so life changing, that, and I think that's a really good example for how we can continue to support others in their journey, is just allowing them. And I love the word circling back to what you said, the dignity of being themselves and honoring themselves and just being fully the human being. I love that. I always love
Yes.
that play on words.
I do. I love the intrinsic value, like, that you deserve to be loved and you deserve to be respected, not because that you're cute or funny or done great things in the world, but just because of by virtue of your humanity, right? You deserve
Yes.
love, you deserve respect. Like, you don't have to earn it. You don't have to
Yep.
go out and say something funny or clever or anything like that. Like, just sitting there the way you are, you deserve to be loved. And from that loving place, then you can go out in the world and put up your peacock feathers. But it's sort of like that's the external manifestation of an internal thing. In other words, like, we want to do these things and make enough money, and then I'll feel happy. Like, I go
Yeah.
out here and then that'll go to the inside. No, that's completely opposite, right? From my loving place, from my compassionate place, from then I can extend that loving energy out in the world, and you can do great things actually if you do that.
I think that was pretty much a mic drop. I think that that was just the everything that anyone needs to know.
Well, call me up in 6 months and play it back to me so you can remind me to do that.
We'll put it on a plaque for you and
Good.
then
I've got several of those sitting around, to remind me of, those kind of things. But yeah, I think you're right on the right track, and I appreciate the work that you're doing in bringing this material out to the world. I think you'll touch so many people and help so many people. I think you're doing God's work for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. You kind of put it perfectly in what we're trying to do, is that so much of spirituality or the spiritual path or connecting to your spirituality is exactly what you said, feeling enough and loved and full in your humanity. And as a result, your perception of the world, of reality, becomes so much grander, and you feel so much more connected to a larger, perspective. And to me, that's what spirituality is our own path in our humanity and in this human lifetime, and how we can apply meaning and healing and growth to that.
Yes, yes, and the spirituality part is just like we're connected. The idea that we're separate from other people is laughable. It's ridiculous, that
Yes.
we're really
Yeah.
literally all brothers and sisters, really in this all together. Every us and every living
Yes.
creature on this earth, we're all a part of a whole. If
Yeah.
I don't know if people believe in God or not, but if you do believe in God, then God is omnipresent. God's everywhere, right? And so God is in me and
Mhm.
in you and all the people you don't agree with politically, and all the animals that are suffering in the world, and
Yeah.
it's everywhere. And so it really connects us. It really plugs us into the universe, bigger
Yes.
picture. Yeah.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that's what we're trying to shift the perception of, the capitalistic version of spirituality has really run with this one narrative where really I think exactly what you said is it's all about unity and honoring our our connectedness and how we can do that together, and through our own self-healing and through our own self-empowerment we are collectively healing and we're collectively coming together and raising our own consciousness because we're coming out of these moments of suffering stronger and wiser.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like, what am I going to do with this? Well, I can go get bitter and go down, 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 or I can use it to step up and lift myself up, and then from that, lift other folks up. You were saying something about that, about teaching, helping others, or teaching others. That is a natural outflow.
Yeah.
That you almost can't stop yourself.
Yeah.
Um, I look at it like you mentioned Ram Dass. I think my teachers studied with Ram Dass and these different teachers, and the wisdom goes from him to them, and then through them to me, and then from me to my clients or my friends or to you. And so that line of loving energy runs from one generation to the next. We pass it to each other, and so
Yeah.
we're really really connected to the wise women and wise men of the past in a really like it's in our DNA basically.
I agree with that, and I think that that's something that we've become so disconnected to, is that we used to have this wisdom that was passed down through our lineages that we used to understand, that was innately part of ourselves. And over time as our society evolved, whether you want to call it the patriarchy or whatever, that has disconnected us from this wisdom, from this ancestral knowing. And
Mhm.
it's really beautiful to watch us come back to that.
Yeah, it gives me a lot of hope. It really
Me
does.
too. Me too. One thing that I was thinking of while you were saying that too is I don't think that anyone on this path who has awakened to this connectedness then wakes up and says like, "Oh, I'm going to create this multi-billion-dollar corporation that treats people poorly and ruins the environment and hoards all these billions of dollars." And I think that's a very important distinction because you realize that as we become more self-aware, there is this connectedness between us and all things and the way we treat others and the way that we love our earth and ourselves and animals and other people. And I think it changes everything, and it's beautiful to see our society going in that way where more people are stepping back into that place of unity instead of me, me, me. I don't care. It's just a stupid piece of grass and it's just a stupid pig and just someone who lives in a country I don't know how to pronounce. And the fact that we're coming back to our humanity in honoring all of those things I think is really beautiful and gives me hope.
Yeah. Oh boy. I mean, that's you said it. You said it right there. Is like the things that separate us are kind of artificial, and when those things
Yeah.
are swept away, then what's left is our obvious connection uh, to to God, to everything in the universe.
Yeah. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on this show. I always like to end with wise words for anyone watching who just needs an extra pick me up to step into their best self today. So, what are your wise words to end on?
Boy, I wish I were wise. That would be, I could really, that would help me out here. Uh, but I'd say to be, I would look for the kindness in each situation, look for the kindness in yourself. Um, just be aware of your inner world and uh, be aware of your inner journey, and kind of let that guide you through the day.